Welcome back to our channel, where we share inspiring stories that touch the heart and change perspectives. Today's story features Robert Downey Jr. and a powerful lesson about humility, judgment, and what true success really means. Before we begin, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our daily inspirational content. Now let's dive into today's story. Robert Downey Jr. stood calmly in the first-class line at Los Angeles International Airport. Unlike the glamorous travelers around him, he was dressed simply in a worn plaid shirt, faded jeans, and scuffed boots that had clearly seen many miles. His well-traveled backpack hung casually from one shoulder. In the midst of the airport chaos, people rushing, announcements blaring, luggage wheels clicking against the floor, Robert maintained a peaceful presence, seemingly disconnected from the stress and hurry around him. He observed everything with quiet interest, appearing completely comfortable in his own skin, despite the stark contrast between his casual appearance and the luxury environment. Standing directly behind Robert was Victor Harding, who embodied everything opposite to Robert's understated presence. Victor wore an immaculately tailored designer suit, Italian leather shoes polished to a mirror shine, and an expensive cologne that seemed to announce his arrival before he even entered a room. Every movement Victor made appeared calculated to project importance and status. When his gaze fell upon Robert's casual attire, Victor couldn't contain his judgment. "First class, huh?" Victor remarked with a condescending smile. "You never know who might show up here these days." The comment was clearly meant to suggest that Robert didn't belong. Robert turned to face Victor with the same serene expression. "Yeah, the world is full of surprises," he replied simply, his voice lacking any defensiveness or irritation. Victor frowned slightly, having expected a more defensive reaction that would validate his sense of superiority. "Look, nothing personal," Victor pressed further, "but you don't seem like the type who flies like this. It's rare to see someone so casual in first class." He chuckled as if sharing an inside joke, though no one was laughing with him. When boarding began, both men moved forward with their tickets. Victor walked with rigid, confident strides while Robert maintained his relaxed pace. As they entered the plane, Victor was shocked to discover that Robert was assigned the seat directly beside his. "You've got to be kidding me," Victor muttered, shaking his head in disbelief. After settling in, Victor couldn't resist continuing his subtle provocations. "So what do you do for a living?" he asked with feigned casual interest, clearly expecting an answer that would confirm his assumptions about Robert's social standing. "I work in film," Robert answered simply as he tucked his backpack under the seat in front of him. Victor raised his eyebrows dramatically. "Oh, I see. Commercials? Small-time stuff?" His tone suggested he had already decided on Robert's worth. Robert smiled slightly. "Something like that," he replied, neither confirming nor denying Victor's assumption. Victor laughed condescendingly. "I've always found it interesting how people try to find their place, you know? But sometimes certain spaces just aren't meant for everyone. Like first class, for instance." Robert considered Victor's words for a moment before responding. "I think we all have our place," he said thoughtfully, "and sometimes it's exactly where we are." His philosophical response seemed to irritate Victor even more. When the flight attendant came by with the drink service, Victor made a show of ordering champagne, commenting loudly about wanting something that matches the exclusivity of the seat. Robert simply requested water, which prompted another round of mockery from Victor. "Water? Don't tell me you're going to waste the experience of flying first class with water," Victor scoffed, swirling his champagne glass performatively. Robert took a small sip of his water and replied, "I'm fine with this. Sometimes simplicity is enough." "Yeah, I guess that works for people who settle for less," Victor retorted. "Not everyone is born to enjoy the best life has to offer." By this point, other passengers had begun to notice the increasingly uncomfortable exchange. Some exchanged concerned glances, while others watched with disapproval as Victor continued his attempt to demean Robert. Despite the tension, Robert maintained his composure, responding to Victor's provocations with calm, thoughtful replies that often left Victor struggling for a comeback. "You know, life is like flying first class," Victor continued, gesturing grandly with his champagne. "You work hard, earn your spot, and then you get to enjoy it. But some people, well, it seems like they're only here because they got lucky. I think the value of being here, Robert replied, gesturing around the cabin, isn't about what you have, but how you treat others. The statement hung in the air, resonating with everyone who heard it. Several passengers exchanged approving glances, while Victor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. As the flight progressed, Victor's attempts to reassert his perceived superiority became increasingly desperate. You know what's funny? People who have nothing to show for themselves always talk about things like humility and simplicity. Ever notice that? Robert leaned forward slightly, looking Victor in the eye. I've noticed that sometimes the people who talk the most about what they have are the ones who feel the emptiest inside. The words struck Victor like a physical blow, leaving him momentarily speechless. The tension reached its peak when Victor, clearly frustrated by his inability to intimidate Robert, stood up abruptly, knocking his empty champagne glass to the floor. "You think you're better than me?" he shouted, drawing shocked stares from everyone in the cabin. "Sitting there with your clever little phrases, acting like you know everything about life, but you don't know a thing about what it's like to live in the real world." Robert remained seated, waiting for Victor to finish before responding. "I don't think I'm better than you," he said with gentle firmness. "I just think that sometimes we need to stop and think about what really matters. And Victor, you don't have to prove anything to anyone." Something in Robert's voice seemed to pierce through Victor's anger, causing him to sink back into his seat, now looking more defeated than combative. Later in the flight, the identity of the humble man in plaid was revealed when a flight attendant approached. "Mr. Downey, the captain asked me to inform you that your connection in Tokyo is confirmed. He also sends his best regards." The name rippled through the cabin like an electric current, passengers exchanging wide-eyed looks of recognition. "Downey?" Victor murmured in disbelief. "Robert Downey Jr.?" Victor's face paled as the realization sank in that he had spent the flight attempting to belittle one of Hollywood's most beloved actors, known not just for his success, but for his remarkable comeback story and authenticity. I had no idea," Victor stammered. "I mean, you didn't say who you were." Robert's expression remained unchanged. "I didn't think it was necessary," he replied. "I don't usually use my name as a calling card." "Look, I didn't mean to offend you," Victor continued desperately. "I just didn't know who I was talking to." Robert leaned forward slightly. "Victor, what you said doesn't change just because you now know my name. The truth doesn't depend on who you're speaking to. It depends on how you choose to treat people." The wisdom of these words left Victor speechless, forcing him to confront the ugliness of his behavior. For the remainder of the flight, Victor sat in contemplative silence, replaying the encounter in his mind. The arrogance he'd carried onto the plane had evaporated, replaced by a deep sense of shame. He kept stealing glances at Robert, who had returned to reading his book as if nothing unusual had happened. As the plane prepared for landing, Victor finally gathered the courage to speak again. "I need to apologize," he said quietly, his eyes downcast. "Not for what I said just because you're you, but because I was arrogant. I acted like an idiot." Robert looked at him, his expression as tranquil as ever. "I appreciate the apology, but more than that, I hope you learn from this," he responded. Then he added, "Sometimes what we search for most in the world is what we find least within ourselves. I hope you figure out what really matters." After disembarking, Victor stood motionless in the terminal, watching as Robert walked away. Several fans approached the actor for photos and autographs, and Robert greeted each one with genuine warmth and patience. There was no trace of the entitlement or superiority that Victor had displayed throughout the flight. Instead, Robert's interactions demonstrated that his kindness and humility were deeply ingrained parts of his character. Looking down at his expensive watch and custom-tailored suit, Victor realized that all his outward symbols of success had done nothing to make him a better person. In fact, they had perhaps encouraged his worst tendencies. Robert's words echoed in his mind. True success doesn't need to be shouted about. It speaks for itself. For the first time in years, Victor felt a genuine desire to change, to measure his worth not by his possessions or status, but by how he treated others. As Robert disappeared into the crowd, Victor took a deep breath. Perhaps this encounter hadn't been a coincidence, but an opportunity, a chance to reconsider his values and start living with more kindness and humility. He understood now that true respect cannot be demanded through displays of wealth or power. It must be earned through one's actions and character. The story of Victor and Robert serves as a powerful reminder that in life's journey, our treatment of others reveals far more about who we are than any material possessions ever could. True success isn't measured by the luxury we surround ourselves with, but by the positive impact we have on those we encounter along the way. In the end, it's not about impressing others, but about becoming better people. A lesson that Robert Downey Jr., both in this story and in real life, exemplifies through his actions rather than his words. The story of Victor and Robert reminds us that our treatment of others reveals far more about who we are than any material possessions ever could. True success isn't measured by luxury, but by our positive impact on others. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that can change your perspective and perhaps your life. Until next time, remember to treat everyone with kindness. You never know who might be sitting next to you.